Some women don't age, they just repeat. It's not about wrinkles or birthdays. It's a psychic loop, hidden, seductive, and destructive. They laugh like girls, flee like rebels, and sabotage like ghosts. But behind the sparkle, there is a deep fear of becoming whole. In this video, we'll uncover the archetype that Jung called the Puella Aeterna, the eternal girl, not a phase, not a personality, but a psychological structure that traps women in the illusion of endless freedom. We'll dive into her wounds, her myths, her patterns, and the path to liberation, because real freedom isn't the absence of limits, it's the courage to grow through them. The woman who never grows up, the Puella Aeterna. Have you ever met a woman who seems to live in a never-ending fairy tale? The kind who, despite her age, still behaves like a spellbound teenager? Jung named this psychic pattern Puella Aeterna. She's not a child, but not quite an adult either. Her soul lingers in a psychological limbo, where growing up feels more like a threat than an achievement. The Puella Aeterna avoids commitments, resists structure, and runs from anything that smells like adulthood. And the most curious part? She often doesn't even realize it. Her lightness is charming, her energy intoxicating, but beneath the glow lies a fragmented psyche. She lives in the present, as long as it doesn't tie her down. Jung saw her as trapped within an archetype, an ancient image living in the collective unconscious. But why does this archetype manifest? What drives her to resist maturation? The answer isn't simple. It's not about weakness or selfishness, but a complex psychic structure shaped by trauma, parental ties, and culture. The Puella often carries a deep wound, the fear of vanishing into adult routine, as if commitment and stability were emotional prisons. She chases intensity, passion, and freedom. But behind it lies a desperate escape from the mature self. To grow up means to face the shadow, and she's not quite ready for that. On the outside, she seems independent, but inside, she may be full of hidden dependencies on attention, validation, or escapism. Her inner world is like an enchanted garden, beautiful yet fragile. The slightest pressure can make it collapse, and when it does, she blames the world, never the archetype. A common trait is her obsession with youth, not just physical, but existential youth of novelty, beauty, and endless freedom. The Puella lives among countless versions of herself, but refuses to choose one, because to choose is to limit, and to limit is to die in her mind. She doesn't realize that this escape is what truly traps her. Her refusal to grow up isn't always conscious. Often it's a defense formed in early life, shaped by absent fathers, overbearing mothers, or unstable homes. The Puella Aeterna isn't just a choice, it's a symptom of a wounded emotional structure still seeking healing. Despite appearances, this woman often suffers. She feels misunderstood, out of place, like the adult world has no room for her dreamy soul. But she confuses dreams with escapism and freedom with lack of responsibility. And when reality strikes, she collapses, emotionally, financially, or romantically. Relationships with a Puella can be magnetic and destructive. Partners are drawn to her spontaneity, but quickly sense her absence. She loves love, but not everyday life. She craves intensity, not consistency. Everything about her is enchanting. Until emotional maturity is required. She may even sound conscious and spiritual. She speaks of authenticity, freedom, and depth, but often it's just persona. A well-polished mask guarding a wounded child. And the louder she defends her independence, the more she reveals her emotional dependence without even knowing it. She often lives in cycles, idealize, fall in love, get disappointed, escape again and again. Because deep down, she's not in love with others. She's in love with a fantasy of herself. Every experience is a failed attempt to fill a void that no adventure can fix, only self-awareness. And that's the great challenge of the Puella Aeterna. She must see herself, face her contradictions, fears, and masks. She must realize that growing up doesn't kill the soul. It expands it. Maturity is not the end of magic, it's the beginning of something deeper. But that shift only begins when she dares to look within. The modern world fuels this archetype. Social media, eternal youth culture, and curated identities all reinforce the escape. The woman who refuses to grow is applauded until her internal structures collapse, and then she asks, "Why does this keep happening to me?" The answer lies in the invisible roots of her psyche. The Puella Aeterna is a living symbol. She reveals what happens when we fear transformation. She is as radiant as sunrise, but she needs sunset to deepen. Life demands more of her. The self is calling, but will she hear it, or keep chasing illusionary butterflies? Because at some point the escape becomes exhausting, and it is in that exhaustion that the breakthrough begins. Jung said that what we do not face within appears as fate. The Puella believes the world is against her, but perhaps it's only her own shadow begging to be seen. Origin and mythological foundation. The term Puella Aeterna originates from Latin, meaning eternal girl. It is the feminine counterpart of the puer aeternus, the eternal boy. This archetype is rooted in ancient mythology, where gods, like Iacchus, Dionysus, and Eros, embodied eternal youth, boundless ecstasy, and transcendence. But beneath their allure, these gods carried a warning. Immortality without growth becomes a curse. In myth, Dionysus dances between worlds, divine and human, structured and chaotic. His youthful energy is seductive, but it's also unstable. The Puella Aeterna embodies that same energy. She seeks endless pleasure and freedom, refusing the structure that life demands. Her psyche remains caught in a mythic loop, where maturity feels like betrayal. These mythological figures were not simply youthful, they were disruptors of order. Dionysus shattered conventions, Eros disturbed peace. They ignited passion and madness. The eternal girl, like them, resists norms. She feels alive only when everything is uncertain, but in that instability she loses herself. The myth becomes her prison, unlike the hero's journey, where transformation comes from trials. The Puella often avoids them altogether. She romanticizes the threshold, never crossing it. She dreams of adventure, but fears commitment. She desires to be chosen by fate, without the effort of individuation. And so her myth remains incomplete, beautiful, but unfinished. This archetype's power lies in its illusion. It tells her she is special, above the ordinary, destined for something greater. But in reality, it traps her in a cycle of avoidance. Myth offers meaning, yes. But when it becomes an identity, it becomes a mask. And the longer she wears it, the harder it is to know who she truly is. In many ways, the Puella Aeterna is the modern nymph, elusive, magical, untouched by time, and just as dangerous to herself. Her myth tells her she is free, but she is bound by invisible chains. Chains made of idealization, fantasy, and a deep-rooted fear of becoming ordinary. In truth, she is terrified of being real. Archetypes are timeless, but they manifest differently across cultures. In our age, the Puella archetype is amplified. Social media rewards aesthetic youth. Relationships are transient. Identity is fluid. In this cultural mythos, the eternal girl is everywhere, not as a warning, but as a model, a fantasy normalized. But behind the myth, the psyche suffers because real life demands roots, a job, a partner, a purpose. These require sacrifice, repetition, effort. The Puella sees these as threats to her freedom, not paths to fulfillment. She longs for meaning, without the weight of responsibility. But meaning only comes with depth. The mythology of youth glorifies beginnings, first love, first success, first discovery. But the real alchemy happens later, when you persist, endure, evolve. The Puella Aeterna archetype freezes the psyche. In the prologue, the story never develops. And that's the tragedy. She could be so much more if she dared to stay. Like Persephone, the Puella often resists the descent, but Jung taught that the descent is necessary. Only in the underworld do we meet the shadow, confront the unconscious, and reclaim lost parts of ourselves. The eternal girl must eventually enter the darkness, or she risks becoming a ghost in her own life. Myth teaches us that transformation requires ordeal, but the Puella myth skips the ordeal. She wants transcendence without trial, love without pain, self without sacrifice. In doing so, she traps herself in a state of perpetual potential, never actualized. Her life becomes a series of openings that never lead anywhere. And yet, the myth has a purpose. It keeps her alive, hopeful, enchanted. It protects her from the trauma she hasn't yet faced. Her psyche clings to the myth as a shield. But what once protected her now limits her, because every myth, when held too tightly, becomes a lie. Even the most beautiful one. To outgrow the Puella archetype is to challenge the myth, to ask, what am I beyond this image? What do I truly want? Beyond freedom? Can I endure responsibility and still remain magical? These questions are not easy, but they are essential. Without them, she is just a character, not an author of her story. The danger of the myth is that it feels safer than the unknown. But no true transformation happens in safety. The woman who lives as Puella Aeterna must risk disillusionment. She must dare to grow roots in a world that taught her to float. She must become the heroine of her own life, not just the muse of someone else's, because the myth is only the beginning. What she does with it, that's where the real story starts. If she can rewrite her narrative, accept the pain of transition, and embrace the maturity she once feared, she will discover that the real magic was never in staying young. It was in finally becoming whole. Psychological traits of the Puella Aeterna. The Puella Aeterna is not defined by her age, but by the emotional patterns she repeats. She might be 30, 40, or even older, but her inner world remains stuck in the adolescent phase. Immature, attachments, intense emotional swings, and the constant need to escape, define her psychic landscape. It's not about time, it's about development. One of her most striking traits is the idealization of youth, not just its beauty, but its promise. She clings to the belief that life should always feel new, exciting, and open-ended. Anything that smells of repetition, routines, responsibilities, roles, triggers her fear of stagnation. She equates adulthood with death and spontaneity with life. This idealization leads to a deep fear of aging, not just physically, but existentially. She dreads settling down, being just another adult, losing her charm. In reality, her fear isn't of time, but of irrelevance. She's terrified of waking up and realizing she's no longer the center of someone else's story. The Puella also exhibits commitment avoidance. Long-term relationships, career paths, or life decisions that require consistency make her feel trapped. She prefers open doors, multiple choices, infinite potential, but ironically, this resistance prevents her from ever truly living, because to live fully is to choose. Behind her free-spirited appearance, the Puella often harbors emotional dependency. She may rely on her parents for financial support or lean heavily on partners for validation and care. She wants to appear independent, but beneath the surface, she fears standing alone. Her freedom is often funded by someone else's stability. Emotional instability is another hallmark. Her feelings are intense, unfiltered, and volatile. She swings from euphoria to despair with little provocation. Small issues become grand narratives. Her inner world is rich but chaotic. This drama gives her life color, but it also exhausts her and those around her. The Puella tends to reject authority, whether it's a boss, a parent, or societal expectations. She views rules as suffocating and structure as a threat to her authenticity. But this rejection often masks a deeper fear, the fear of being held accountable, because accountability demands maturity, and maturity requires sacrifice. A subtle but persistent trait is psychological immaturity. She may avoid feedback, lash out when criticized, or withdraw when challenged. Her default defense is to retreat into fantasy, travel, new relationships. She avoids conflict not out of peace, but out of fear. Facing herself feels like too much. Her inner child is active, sometimes too much so. She seeks constant excitement and newness, like a child craving playtime, but this also means she struggles with boredom and depth. She may abandon people, projects, or dreams the moment the sparkle fades. Her love of beginnings keeps her from ever finishing. The Puella often struggles with self-sabotage. She may attract partners who mirror her chaos or destroy opportunities once things get serious. Deep down, she fears success because it threatens her identity as someone free, untamed, different. The more she claims to seek growth, the more she unknowingly resists it. Her worldview is infused with idealism and fantasy. She sees life through a romantic, even poetic lens, which can be beautiful but blinding. She may expect perfection in love, destiny in work, and meaning in every experience. Reality, then, feels like betrayal, and so she escapes again. In relationships, she can be enchanting but exhausting. She creates intensity without stability, passion without roots. Partners often feel deeply connected, only to realize they're dancing with a ghost, someone more committed to the idea of love than to love itself. She wants to be adored, but not truly seen. Her sense of self is often fragmented. She wears multiple personas, shifting depending on who she's with. Artist, rebel, healer, wanderer. But who is she really? The Puella fears definition, but in avoiding it, she loses coherence. Her soul becomes a collage of borrowed dreams. Deep down, there is a disconnection from the adult self. She resists integrating the wise, stable, grounded aspects of her psyche. She sees maturity as dull, not empowering. But without the adult self, she remains in limbo, floating through life, chasing meaning, avoiding embodiment. And yet, within all of this, there is potential. These traits are not fixed. They're invitations. Every shadow is a doorway. The Puella Aeterna holds within her the seed of profound transformation. If she dares to look inward, face herself, and embrace the parts of her she's always feared becoming. Parental complexes, the mother and father, in the formation of the Puella. The Puella Aeterna doesn't emerge from nowhere. Her psychological roots are often found in her early relationships, especially with her parents. Jung's analytical psychology emphasizes that the mother and father aren't just people in our lives. They become internal structures in our psyche. And if those bonds are distorted, so is our inner architecture. A common dynamic is the overprotective or emotionally enmeshed mother. This type of mother smothers the child with care, love, or anxiety. She may mean well, but she never lets the daughter truly grow. The Puella learns to be taken care of, to be the center, to remain the little girl, and never learns to become a woman. In this dynamic, autonomy becomes dangerous. The daughter unconsciously fears independence, not because she can't handle it, but because it would betray the mother's emotional investment. She stays small, helpless, dependent, not just materially, but psychologically. And this dependency disguises itself as freedom. The father complex often plays a more subtle but equally devastating role. When the father is cold, absent, or emotionally distant, the daughter develops an internal void. She may idealize men or authority figures, or she may reject them altogether. Either way, she never integrates the masculine within. This lack of a stable, loving paternal image creates confusion. She oscillates between idolizing and distrusting masculinity. She may fall for emotionally unavailable men or run from any form of structure. Her relationships become projections, not real connections. She isn't relating to others but to unmet needs. When both mother and father wounds coexist, the result is a fragile psyche. The Puella may crave protection while resenting control. She desires intimacy but fears it will suffocate her. She appears independent but often seeks saviors. These contradictions pull her in opposite directions, leaving her psychologically paralyzed. The unresolved mother complex can lead to emotional immaturity. She may repeat her mother's patterns unconsciously or rebel against them completely. Both reactions are forms of entrapment. Real individuation, or real growth, only begins when she sees the mother clearly with all her light and shadow. Likewise, the father complex stunts her ability to confront the world. The father represents logos, structure, clarity, direction. Without this, she drifts. She fears authority because she never had a nurturing example of it. To reclaim her life, she must first reclaim the father within, not as a man, but as a psychic function. These complexes are powerful because they are unconscious. She doesn't realize she's reenacting her childhood. She just feels that commitment is scary or that freedom is essential. But these feelings are echoes, not truths. Until examined, they will rule her life like invisible gods. Jung believed that confronting the parental complexes is non-negotiable. It's a rite of passage in the individuation process. To become whole, the Puella must confront the ghosts of her upbringing. She must see her parents not as gods or enemies, but as flawed humans. Only then can she retrieve her stolen power. This confrontation is painful. It shakes the foundation of identity. But it's also liberating, because beneath the complex there is a woman waiting to emerge, a woman who no longer needs to be rescued, adored, or coddled. She is enough, but she must go back to the roots to move forward. Sometimes the Puella repeats the same patterns with new faces. She turns her lovers into fathers, her friends into mothers, her bosses into judges. Every relationship becomes a reenactment. And until she sees the script, she cannot rewrite it. The story keeps looping until she says, enough. Integrating these complexes doesn't mean rejecting her parents. It means differentiating, seeing where they end and she begins, claiming her voice, her choices, her responsibility. And above all, it means grieving for the childhood she didn't have, for the nurturance she missed, for the girl she had to become to survive. This grief is sacred. It cracks open the false self. It softens the defenses. And in that tenderness, the adult self can emerge, the woman who doesn't need to run anymore, who can love without collapsing, who can stay. That's the beginning of real freedom, not from others, but from her own unconscious, because only when she sees her past clearly can she shape her future. The parental complexes no longer define her. She is no longer the daughter. She is no longer the child. She becomes the author. And with that power, she can begin to write a story that is hers, fully, fiercely, and finally. The shadow archetype, the Senex. Every archetype casts a shadow, and the Puella Aeterna is no exception. Her opposite is the Senex, the wise old man, the embodiment of order, discipline, responsibility, and inner structure. While the Puella floats in possibilities, the Senex is rooted in boundaries. He doesn't chase dreams. He builds foundations. In Jungian analysis, these two figures are psychological poles. The Puella is the spirit of youth, the spark of inspiration, the refusal to conform. The Senex is the container, the planner, the enforcer of structure. Without him, she remains fragmented. Without her, he becomes rigid, cold, lifeless. One needs the other. The Puella often fears the Senex because he threatens her freedom, but that fear is actually a projection. She's afraid of her own potential for maturity. She avoids structure, not because it's evil, but because it demands accountability. And accountability means the game of escape is over. Yet, the Senex is not the enemy. He is the missing father she never internalized, the wise guide she never had, the voice of reason that never took root. When repressed, he shows up externally as rules she hates, bosses she resents, partners she can't connect with. But in truth, he lives inside her, waiting to be embraced. The absence of the Senex makes her life feel ungrounded. She drifts from job to job, from partner to partner, from phase to phase, always in motion, never arriving. Her creativity lacks direction, her dreams lack structure, and her heart, despite its passion, never finds peace. Embracing the Senex means developing emotional discipline, not the suppression of feelings, but the ability to contain, reflect, and channel them. It's the power to pause before reacting, to think before fleeing, to choose depth over thrill. The Senex brings this gift, but only if she's willing to listen. Many Puella-oriented women reject the Senex because they associate him with patriarchy, control, or trauma. But the true Senex is not domination. He is integration. He gives form to chaos, meaning to motion, and continuity to insight. Without him, all her awakenings are momentary. The Puella seeks transcendence, but transcendence without grounding becomes dissociation. She wants to fly, but has no nest. The Senex builds that nest, not to trap her, but to sustain her. He doesn't clip her wings. He teaches her how to land, and only then can true growth happen. In mythology, the Senex often appears as the wise mentor, like Merlin to Arthur or Gandalf to Frodo. He does not impose. He appears when the hero is ready. Likewise, in the psyche, the Senex arises when the Puella tires of running. When she begins to yearn not for escape, but for transformation. She resists him at first. His voice sounds like judgment. His presence feels like a cage. But over time she realizes he is the part of her that has been waiting, silently, for her to return. He is her inner anchor, her deeper knowing, her path to self-respect. The Senex brings structure to the soul. He teaches her how to commit, how to persevere, how to choose long-term over instant gratification. These lessons feel painful at first, like losing her spark, but in truth, they are the foundation of lasting joy. Not fireworks, but fire that warms for life. Integrating the Senex does not mean abandoning the Puella. It means balancing her, keeping her aliveness while tempering it with wisdom, keeping her creativity while focusing it, keeping her wildness while guiding it. This is shadow work, not to kill the inner child, but to give her a home. Without the Senex, the Puella remains trapped in eternal adolescence. With him, she becomes a woman, not just a performer of feminine roles, but a conscious feminine force, capable of loving without losing herself, of building without fear, of dreaming with both feet on the ground. Jung believed that shadow integration was essential to individuation. The Puella must not only see the Senex, she must become him, in part. Just as he must learn from her joy, she must absorb his depth. Only then does the psyche become whole. Only then does the eternal girl become truly alive. Because at the end of the road, the question is not, how long can I stay young? The real question is, can I become whole? And the answer begins when the Puella stops running, turns toward the shadow, and finds in the Senex not a jailer, but a guide who was hers all along. Paths to integration and growth. The journey out of the Puella Aeterna archetype doesn't mean killing the inner girl. It means growing her up. It means integrating her wonder with wisdom, her freedom with responsibility, her beauty with depth. This transformation isn't quick, but it is profoundly possible. And it begins with one powerful decision: to stop running. The first step is often Jungian analysis, a deep therapeutic process that explores the unconscious, reveals patterns, and invites integration. The Puella must confront the stories she's told herself. I'm special. I don't need anyone. I'm not meant for ordinary life. These beliefs are not truths. They are survival masks. In therapy, she learns to decode the symbols of her dreams, to witness her projections, to face her shadow. She meets the parts of herself she abandoned: the scared child, the angry daughter, the wise woman. The unconscious becomes a map, not a threat, a place where lost treasure waits beneath the pain. Another essential practice is shadow work, facing the aspects of self that were repressed or denied: her immaturity, her envy, her passivity, her manipulation. By owning these shadows, she becomes more whole, more real, more grounded. Not perfect, but powerful. Real growth requires practical autonomy, not just emotional insight, but action, paying her own bills, holding a job, staying in a relationship when it gets hard. These are not punishments, they are initiations. Every responsibility she once feared becomes a doorway to self-respect. Along the way, she must reclaim her body. The Puella often floats above. Reality lost in thought, in fantasy, in dreams. But integration requires embodiment. Through movement, rituals, breathwork, or grounded daily routines, she reconnects with the earth and with herself. The Puella must also redefine freedom. True freedom isn't the absence of limits. It's the ability to choose your limits consciously, to build a life that reflects your essence, to say yes to what matters and no to what distracts. She learns that a sacred no is just as powerful as a liberating yes. She benefits immensely from mentors and mature feminine archetypes, women who embody the queen, the mother, the wise woman. Not as authorities, but as mirrors, they show her that maturity is not dull, it is luminous, that growing up is not the end of magic, it is its beginning. Deep transformation also involves grieving, for the illusions lost, the years wasted, the patterns repeated. This grief is not weakness, it is cleansing. It makes space for what's real. And through it, she begins to see that what she feared, commitment, responsibility, roots, is what she was secretly longing for. Finally, the path to integration is not linear, it's cyclical. She may regress, she may feel lost again, but each return brings deeper insight. Each fall becomes a deeper rising. And slowly, the Puella becomes a woman who no longer needs to be rescued, because she has become her own guide. She doesn't abandon her lightness, she brings it with her, but now it dances with gravity. She doesn't give up spontaneity, she adds intention. She doesn't stop dreaming, she dreams in detail. This is the alchemy of inner transformation. The eternal girl becomes the eternal soul. The world may not reward this shift right away. It may still applaud the surface, the youth, the illusion. But she knows, she feels it, in her backbone, in her voice, in her choices. She is no longer playing a role. She is living her truth. And that changes everything. She begins to love differently, work differently, speak differently, not to impress, but to express. Her life no longer revolves around attention, but around alignment, and that alignment creates peace, beauty, and depth far greater than any passing thrill. Jung taught that individuation is the path toward wholeness, not perfection. The Puella's healing is not about becoming someone else, but becoming fully herself. Accepting the contradictions, embracing the paradox, living with depth, grace, and grounded wonder, because in the end, she was never meant to remain a girl. She was meant to become a woman of soul, wild and wise, free and rooted, luminous and whole. And now she's ready. So, what if the girl inside you was never supposed to stay? What if she was only the beginning, not the destination? You've idealized freedom, chased intensity, avoided roots. But deep down, you know, you're meant for more than floating. You're meant to build, to love, to become. Growth isn't the death of magic, it's its refinement. The real you isn't lost in the past, she's waiting in the future, and maybe the fear you've been running from is the exact place. Your power lives. What part of you are you still protecting from adulthood? What would change if you stopped running and started returning to yourself? If this made sense to you, if it stirred something, subscribe to the channel, turn on notifications, and stay with us on this journey, because becoming whole is not a one-time revelation. It's a path, and we walk it together.